G'day. Today we are going to be going over the Lord of Battles, Brigandine. Alrighty, so first off, this is the Lord of Battles Wisby cut of plates Brigandine. It is 16 gauge and all the plates are riveted to a black, sometimes brown, suede coat so as to allow the plates for movement. In regards to that, we're pretty much going straight into cons now. Biggest cons about when this particular coat of plates is made, kind of similar to the last Lord of Battles coat of plates I went over, is they have this weird thing where they stack rivets. I don't know why they do this. I've reached out to them on social media and they deny it being incorrect. They say it's made perfectly to standard. However, any reenactor can tell them that is incorrect. The biggest example of an issue of that with this coat of plates is where the buckles are placed. Originally, the buckles were placed in an area halfway in between the existing rivet lines that are riveted along the top of the plates. And in that halfway point, it's pretty much sitting right on top of the plate below it so that the plates themselves are not able to move. I also had to remove the bottom front and the bottom rear plates of this coat of plates so that I could actually sit down. If I still had them on, I would not be able to sit down. This whole thing would be fitting like a soup can and go straight up to my throat. If you're savvy with a drill, I can recommend this armor for you if you want to try to find it on discount usually. I wouldn't recommend paying full price for it. For the flaws with it, it's a lot of rework to make it work. Another flaw is a lot of them tend to be on quite the large size. I mean, I could not figure out who this armor was designed to fit because you'd have to be like 7 feet tall for this to fit. And not only that, though, the plates themselves were flared out in a way that you couldn't really utilize the buckles very well to tighten it up in order to fit your body. It was, like I said, wearing a soup can. Everything was so poorly placed and poorly utilized for positioning that this armor was not really worth the amount I paid for it. Another area that it has had the rivet issues was on the chest plate and the shoulder blade plate. Chest plate being the actual chest area. There's 3 plates beneath the garment right here, and they had placed rivets right on top of the plates for the plate right below it here. The problem with that is you were stuck rigid straight facing up. You could not do any kind of motion. Now, because of my readjustment, I am able to actually bend forward and slump forward if I wanted to. With the original design, that is not possible. The back, I only had to take out one of the bottom rivets just to add for a little bit more movement. You don't really have as much ability to move back there as you do with the chest because your back can only go so far back unless you're a contortionist. As you can see here, the armor does not really have need for a whole lot of movement, but it has a lot more flexibility in it than most plate armors. And that's the biggest benefit of a Brigandine. The Brigandine, if it was made and left as rigid as its original maker had intended, I could not recommend it to anyone. It's poorly assembled and poorly planned out for buckle positioning and rivet positioning. A few pros of this Brigandine is once you actually can make some repairs of it, it's actually a pretty good Brigandine. I mean, you got 16 gauge plate. It does a very good job covering the full of the torso, and you don't have too much restriction if you make the repairs that I have done. The plates themselves now, I can actually bend forward. I'm not having the same issues of plate binding as I did before, and I'm able to better move in this thing. Its original design, I may as well be wearing a soup can. That's how stiff it was. It was not at all flexible, not at all comfortable, really, for how it was put together. The new placement of the buckles really allowed for better comfort and mobility with this armor, but with that original placement they had, it was essentially right on the edge of the plate where the buckles were placed. And what that causes is The front plate, when you try to overlap, ends up striking it immediately and preventing you from tightening the buckles any tighter. The same thing was done with the buckle straps, and with my new adjustment placement of everything moving about 6 inches in, I am able to wear the Armour much more comfortably, and a broader range of individuals can fit it as well. I've loaned it out to a few friends of different weights and sizes, and they've all been able to wear it fairly comfortably. Something else that I added onto the Armour a little bit after I bought it and had done my repairs to it was the teardrop pauldrons. These are also made by Lord of Battles. There's little that can be said negatively about them. They're essentially just simple teardrop pauldrons. They do not have any hindrance to your movement other than maybe a little bit upward, but some of that prevention is from the shoulder portion of the Armour. What's nice about the Armour on the shoulders is it actually has a steel plate there as well, so as to provide a little extra protection on the shoulders, which is definitely a pro with this Armour. Not a lot of Brigandines I've seen actually do that. A lot of them will actually just do simple buckles over the top of the shoulders so the two halves can be taken apart. That particular plate is actually a pretty good idea for this Brigandine, this particular style of Brigandine, so that it can better protect around the neck and shoulder region. I can't tell you how many times I've been struck on the top of the shoulder with limited Armour and how much it can hurt. The gambeson, this is a full gambeson. It's not an arming doublet or a padded jack. This is a full, more of an infantry gambeson, meant to be worn alone. Fits perfectly underneath the coat of plates. The coat of plates I can get to go tighter if I have another person helping me put it on, and it can fit with a regular arming jacket quite close to the body. However, I wear the gambeson with it for that extra padding and protection that it does provide. Another part of this Brigandine that I can speak positively about is the level of protection it gives for the body, both front and back. The shoulder region is nearly completely covered in plates, as well as the chest, which is something more rigid plate struggles to do with, mainly because it being a singular plate and unable to overlap and collapse on itself doesn't allow for the same level of protection for the chest and back. It also, because of those mobile plates, now that I've removed the rivets, able to adjust, I'm able to more put my arms back, move my arms in other ways in a more natural position without hindrance. As the plates will want to overlap, compress, and slip over each other, I'm able to actually use this Armour as the way it was intended by its original designers. It is too long. I said this earlier, that it was made too long, but yeah, even by taking out the lower plates, it is a little bit too long. Right now, the whole of the front plate is pressing down into the top of my legs as I'm sitting here. Not in too uncomfortable of a fashion. However, it does have that issue of coming down quite low, almost down to cover the groin. The bottom of the plates sit right at the hip bone. However, with the adjustments that I did make, it's not that uncomfortable because now the plates are willing to move. If I leave the lower buckles looser than I do the rest of the buckles for the sides, it allows for a little more movement between the two bottom plates, making for it to fit much more comfortably. So I have 2 ratings for this Armour. I can give it both for upon initial receiving. I would give it a solid 3 out of 10. That 3 comes from the fact that you have a very good foundation to work off of. However, the lack of the other points is because of the amount of work that has to go into it in order to make it comfortable and properly usable. After the work I did to it, I can give it more of a, I want to say 7 out of 10. There's room to go on with it. It can still use some improvements. However, at the stage that I got it to, it is perfectly functional for just about anyone else. There's a bunch of holes now where the rivets used to be. There's the lack of the stylized plate for the front that has a semi-curve to it to better fit in the groin region, especially when you sit down. It does not actually really require a lot of work. All you need to do is just know how to use a drill out definitely a bunch of rivets. You will have to drill out a lot of rivets. However, in the long run, it's worth it because if you can get this Armour on a heavy discount, you can get a pretty good Brigandine that requires minimal effort to resize and properly refit. Would I recommend you buy it? As I said in the beginning, not really. Definitely not if it's full price, but if you know what you're doing, if you're a marshal for an SCA group and just trying to collect armor and you see one of these come up on sale online for half price, I would 100% recommend grab it. And I'm certain there's plenty of people in your group that could make the alterations that it needs to be able to be turned into a decent spare set of armor. But if you are just getting into the sport yourself, you're just wanting to get a set of armor for your own personal reenactment to go from group to group as a individual, I can recommend a lot better armor to go for, especially at the price point this comes in. You can get a lot more pieces for better quality and a better reenactment than you can with this one, unless you really specifically want this style of armor for your reenactment. Alrighty, so that it was my coverage of the Lord of Battles wisby coat of plates, or Brigandine. Let me know what you want to see in the next one, and we will try to make it happen. This armor is actually currently just been sold, so you will not be able to see it in the future. Any thoughts that you have on it in the comments for testing, sadly, will not be able to be attempted. However, I really want to hear some theories that you might have or suggestions to alterations should you have gotten this particular set of armor or be looking at it. If you have any questions about it, I can probably answer most of them if you're actually really wanting to buy it. Just as always, link in the description to where you can find it, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.